This is the Digital Trust Podcast. In every episode, we strive to bring support to those of you who serve on the front lines and in the trenches of data and technology. We endeavor to bring understanding to the under-resourced and underappreciated, help remove your stress, and provide relief to your pain. Welcome to the Digital Trust Podcast. Sit down with us as we give you hard-hitting advisory conversations to help you build digital trust with your stakeholders and clients, and actionable takeaways to help you become a digitally trustworthy organization.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Digital Trust Podcast. My name is Christian Redshaw. I am your host today, and I have a special co-host with me in the studio, none other than Rossilyne Tan. Rossilyne, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Christian. I'm really glad to be here today.
It's so good to have you. So for those of you who don't know, Rossilyne is the past president and director of ISACA Vancouver. And Rossilyne, we have a very special guest that I'm particularly excited about today. I've been following his career and his content since about 2016. And it's none other than Ben Beeson. And Ben is the CEO and founder of Galahad Risk Solutions. That's an insurance brokerage out of Washington, D.C. So Ben, welcome to the show.
Christian, Ross, thank you very much. Excited to be on the podcast. Appreciate the invitation.
Beautiful. All right. So I first discovered you, Ben, from a book called Navigating the Digital Age. And that was a book written in 2015. And I believe, if my memory serves me right, you wrote chapter 41 of that book. So in short, Ben, how did that book come about?
That book came about, I had just moved from London to Washington, D.C., and there was a big dialogue going on at the time between the private sector and government here about how the insurance market might help better incentivize cyber resilience. Both in, for government enterprises and in the private sector, not necessarily versus regulation, but, in addition to, and that's how that conversation started. And that's where, that chapter was focused.
Amazing. So Ben, that brings us to today, and you've held senior roles in large brokerages like Lockton and Marsh, and now here you are today with your own brokerage, and you focus on small and mid-sized companies. What made you decide to focus on that particular market segment?
Well, I left the insurance market in 2017, went into the cybersecurity industry, and eventually made the decision, having learned a lot in the cybersecurity industry, to come back to the insurance market and put that to use. And as I sort of got in touch again with some of my old colleagues and connections, one of the things I kept hearing was, the market, the cyber insurance market's doing well, it's growing, but it's still very much an upper mid-market, large enterprise buyer. And there's a problem at the small business end. Not enough small businesses are buying. The penetration rate is very low. And one of the key challenges around that is the insurance brokers are at the coalface, and they're the ones tasked with having those risk discussions and ultimately explaining why it's a good reason to insure the risk as well as mitigate it. And so, I said to myself, well, I'm going to set up a specialty broker to do just that, whose mission is to drive better cyber resilience in the cyber market through cyber insurance.
Beautiful.
The name Galahad, it evokes a sense of knightly protection and a quest for something very significant. What's the story behind that name?
It's well spotted, Rod. Yes, it does actually come from the Knights of the Round Table, so Galahad, who was the purest knight. And I was thinking about a name for the company. One of the things I wanted to do was try and make some sort of connection to my English roots. And King Arthur is always and the Round Table is always one of those things when you think about England, and that's how that connection was made. And I thought at the same time, it's a knight, it's a shield, it's trying to take on a threat, and it seemed to be appropriate.
And given the market that you focus, What do you see SMBs and middle market tends to overlook?
Well, the biggest thing and the biggest problem, I think, is that small businesses still don't think that they're a target or that they face a threat from cyber attacks, right? And we all know who are involved in this area that couldn't be further from the truth now. One good example of that is particularly you're a business and you're in somebody's supply chain, right? Increasingly, if the bad guys want to get to the large enterprise, they might go through the small guys who are in the supply chain, right? And so, that is the number one challenge, I would say, is raising that awareness among smaller businesses and explaining why they need to do something about this.
So Ben, if you're talking to one of those small businesses, probably their IT guy or their IT MSP is handling cybersecurity for them, and that's who's being relied on. What would you say if you were talking to one of your future clients, IT MSPs or IT guys, about cyber risk?
Well, you hit on a good point just to start with, right? A lot of small businesses don't have anybody who's responsible for IT security, right? If they have made a decision to use an MSP, then that's good if it's for general IT services. Has that, I guess the first question I would ask if that has happened is that MSP providing you with security as one of the services? Increasingly, you're starting to see that. If they're not, then you need to think about that, and you can either see whether that MSP can help you in that regard, and I can and discuss what controls they can help provide, and that's something that we can dig into a bit in terms of what's relevant to a smaller business. Or if they're not, then it's if you don't want to hire somebody internally, then you might want to look at somebody else's what they call an MSSP, right? A managed security service provider who focuses on cybersecurity. And the last thing I'll quickly say on that is that it doesn't have to be expensive either for a small business to do something like that. Very often it's priced around how many endpoints you have, and if you're not a big business, it doesn't have to be expensive to do something like that.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So Ben, for an SMB, why would they buy insurance? What does insurance do for them? Cyber insurance.
Well, first of all, and rightly so, people think when they think of insurance, they think of it as balance sheet protection, right? So they think of it as transferring financial risk, and certainly that is very relevant if you think about a ransomware attack on a small business, where they could encrypt your data and just bring you down, and you're out of business quite quickly as a small business if you don't have a lot of money. So that's absolutely right to think of it. But of course now the cyber insurance market is much further than that, and has been very proactive in providing services in addition to insurance as part of that solution. So I'm happy to dig into some of those, Christian, if you'd like.
I think we should definitely get there. So when we're talking about the insurance protection, what it actually does for a business, obviously it covers their losses to a degree. There's a relationship between the risk management practices, but you mentioned something earlier, Ben, about the supply chain. And there's something called business interruption insurance, and then dependent or contingent business interruption insurance. Can you kind of talk about what each of those individual categories mean?
Yeah, so business interruption is really trying to insure you against the event that your network in some ways is compromised, taken down. It's particularly relevant if you think about people who are involved in online e-commerce sales, selling B2C. That's a big problem if their network goes down, they're offline, and so it tries to pay you back, if you like, the lost revenue that you've had, during that period. But then, to your point, well, what happens if you're dependent on somebody else who gets attacked and takes down that third party? So whether it's a vendor, and it impacts you and you're out, you can't function for that reason. So that's something that is extremely useful in terms of what cyber insurance can offer. And that's known as dependent business interruption. So same idea, it's just that, it caters for the event that somebody else you're reliant on gets attacked, and impacts you and causes you a business loss.
When I think about supply chain, obviously small and medium-sized businesses are part of larger organizations' supply chain. So that's one category. But a really prime example, I think, is IT managed service providers, because they have the command of the IT networks of so many organizations of varying sizes. Can you give any advice, Ben, for how an IT MSP might better manage their cyber risk and maybe use insurance as part of that strategy?
The MSP itself? Yeah.
The IT MSP themselves. Yes.
Yeah. It from an insurance standpoint, it starts very much in terms of making sure you're protecting yourself in terms of your what's known as your liability risk to your customers. That's known as technology errors and omissions, and that's something that can be part of a cyber insurance policy, right? It can be, and it's very important. What that tries to do is to align with your contractual risk that you have with your customers. And so if your customers got impacted through your own negligence, and not necessarily intentional, it wouldn't be intentional because it wouldn't be covered, but if it was negligent, then your customers could turn around and sue you, for example, and then the insurance would protect you against that. So that is very important. Typically, you'd see most MSPs buying that coverage. Now, you would expect them to buy something like that. Certainly, if they were providing services for larger enterprises, but maybe not so much on the smaller end. But it's something, if you want to turn that question around, you certainly want to make sure, if you're a small business using an MSP, that they have that coverage in place as well, because you don't want that MSP going out of business if there's a problem. You want to know that they're insured.
Right.
Yeah,
it does. That completely makes sense. Ben, we're out of time. That came on us super quick. I had more questions for you, but we do have you in the future for another episode. So we'll pick up on this thread at some point in the near future. Thanks so much for joining us today, Ben.
Sounds good. Thank you, Christian and Ross. Appreciate it.
Awesome. And thank you to our viewers and listeners for joining us today. You can check out our podcast on all major audio platforms, as well as YouTube and LinkedIn, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks for joining us today on the Digital Trust Podcast. If you found this conversation helpful, please share it with someone you care about. And if you'd like to receive our monthly newsletter, please click the link in the description to subscribe. And to put your mind at ease, our newsletter will include episode summaries with key points and actionable takeaways, plus a heads up on the upcoming episode guests. Rest assured, it won't be a spammy sales message, and we will never sell or share your information. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you on the next episode.